My parents canceled my 18th birthday for my spoiled sister, so I moved out with Grandpa, who cut them off and exposed a heartbreaking secret. So, I just turned 18 a few days ago, which should have been something to celebrate, but things didn't go the way I'd hoped. My parents ended up canceling the party at the last minute, all because my spoiled older sister threw a fit. And the crazy part? She wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place. I'd been looking forward to her being gone, to be honest. The plan was for her to leave for New York City with a bunch of her friends 3 days before my birthday. That would have been perfect. But just my luck, some nasty storms rolled through the Midwest and grounded all flights. So instead of taking off, she got stuck at home. Naturally, she was furious about her trip being postponed, and because of that, my parents were tiptoeing around her like they were walking on glass. They didn't want to upset her any more than she already was. I mean, they wouldn't dream of it, she's the so-called golden child in our family. It's been that way forever. Then, on the actual morning of my birthday, she demanded that the whole celebration be scrapped. Her logic? If she couldn't enjoy herself, then I shouldn't either. And believe it or not, my parents didn't even hesitate, they immediately messaged every single person who was invited and called the whole thing off. They didn't even tell me. I sat there all day, dressed and excited, thinking people were just running late. By 7 p.m., I was still waiting, wondering why nobody had shown up. When I finally asked what was going on, they broke the news to me as if it was no big deal that they'd canceled everything because my sister was feeling too upset to be around any celebration. They didn't even consult me. That was the moment I snapped. I absolutely lost it. I started yelling at them because it was just so cruel and unfair. This wasn't the first time they treated her better than me, it's been like that my whole life. She always gets her way, while I'm expected to be the one who bends, adjusts, and sacrifices. And I've done that. I've done it over and over. But this crossed a line. The thing is, it was their idea to throw a big 18th birthday bash for me in the first place. They were the ones who invited all my friends and relatives. And now they were taking it all away, just like that, because my sister was moaning over a trip that got cancelled for reasons beyond anyone's control. What made it worse was how sneaky they were about it. They told everyone that I'd suddenly gotten sick and asked them not to message me until the next day. They claimed it would make my migraine worse if people kept texting me. So no one reached out. I had no clue what was going on until it was way too late. Once they finally told me the truth, I couldn't hold it in. I started shouting at them, so upset I could barely think straight. But even then, all they cared about was me being too loud, because God forbid my sister wake up from her nap upstairs. That just made me angrier. I didn't care if she was asleep or not. I kept yelling. Eventually, my sister came downstairs, of course, all righteous and smug. She jumped in to defend our parents, saying they hadn't done anything wrong. She claimed she was the one who told them to cancel everything because it would have been insensitive to celebrate while she was so broken up over her trip. Then she had the nerve to call me entitled and spoiled for not understanding that. That was it. I saw red. I just snapped. I started shouting back, cursing without even thinking, and in a blur of anger, I grabbed her by the hair. Things got physical real fast. Our parents had to step in and pull us apart. None of us had noticed the doorbell ringing in all the chaos. When we finally calmed down enough, someone opened the door and there was my grandfather, standing on the porch. Now, my paternal grandpa is not someone you want to mess with. He's got this presence about him that demands respect, and even my parents kind of freeze up when he's around. So him showing up out of the blue? That was bad news for them. He walked right in and asked what all the screaming was about. Naturally, he looked to me since I was the loudest one. Normally, I'd keep my mouth shut and not drag anyone into the messy family dynamics, but this time, I just couldn't. I was too upset to pretend everything was fine. So I told him everything. I laid it all out, how my birthday had been cancelled because of my sister's tantrum, how I was never treated the same way she was, how this wasn't even a one-time thing. I told him this had been going on my whole life, and this latest stunt was just the last straw. And I could tell right away that he was stunned. He looked genuinely shocked. Then, without missing a beat, he turned to my dad and just started going off on him, scolding him like a kid. Turns out, my grandpa had been sending my parents money every month for the past couple of years to help them keep their business and household afloat. I didn't even know that. He was the one funding everything, including the birthday party my parents were about to take credit for. He told them flat out that they'd disappointed him. That the way they treated me wasn't just unfair, it was hurtful and damaging. He said it was obvious from how I acted that their favoritism had taken a toll on me. And he wasn't wrong. My parents just stood there quietly while he spoke, not daring to interrupt. But my sister, being the absolute brat she is, tried to butt in. She claimed she'd only asked for the party to be cancelled because she was devastated about her trip, and it was selfish of me to want to celebrate when she was suffering. Grandpa wasn't having any of it. He shut her down immediately. Told her, straight up, that she was the definition of entitlement to even think it was okay to cancel my 18th birthday over her cancelled vacation. He told her the world didn't revolve around her, and from the look on her face, that might have been the first time anyone had said that to her out loud. Her backtalking only made him angrier, and finally, he told my parents that he was done helping them. From that moment on, they were on their own. After everything blew up that night, my grandpa looked me straight in the eyes and said, "If you want to leave this place, pack your bags and come with me." He didn't even hesitate. He could see it plain as day that my parents had no real intention of standing up for me. They were so wrapped up in catering to my sister, they barely blinked when he said he was cutting off all financial support. That was the only thing they seemed truly upset about, not the fact that their daughter was about to walk out the door for good. That told me all I needed to know. My grandpa was absolutely right, they didn't care about me the way they should have. I didn't waste a second. While my parents were still trying to sweet-talk and argue their way into convincing Grandpa not to withdraw his support, I slipped upstairs and started tossing my things into a bag. I could hear them downstairs, practically pleading, but I didn't care. I packed as fast as I could and came right back down. My grandpa didn't say another word to my dad, not even a goodbye. We walked out the front door, and he never looked back. On the drive to his place, he turned to me and said he was sorry. He apologized for everything I'd been through and told me he should have stepped in a long time ago. I wasn't exactly sure what he meant by that, but I appreciated hearing it. Honestly, I was just relieved to be getting out. I'm staying with him now, and for the first time in a while, I actually feel like someone's in my corner. Of course, my parents aren't too thrilled about this whole setup. They've been trying to reach out non-stop. I haven't blocked them yet, but I haven't replied either. Not once. I've read all their messages, seen the missed calls, but I haven't responded. I don't think they really deserve that from me right now. They've been sending apology after apology, mostly from my mom, saying they didn't realize how badly they treated me. They keep insisting they never meant to hurt me and that they just thought my sister needed more attention because she's more emotionally fragile. According to them, they believed I was the stronger one, so I could handle being sidelined. But let's be honest here, my sister is almost 5 years older than me. She's 23. If anyone should be mature enough to handle sharing parents, it's her, not me. So no, I didn't buy a single word of that. It felt like they were just trying to cover their tracks so I'd come back and, more importantly, so Grandpa might start helping them out again. I wasn't asking for the world. All I ever wanted was one honest, heartfelt apology. Something real. But that never came. Instead, it was all just excuses dressed up as regret. It got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. So this morning, I finally texted my dad back. I told him straight up I knew exactly why they were suddenly acting sorry. I told him to stop texting me with these fake apologies because I was done. I reminded him that they showed me exactly where I stood in their priorities the moment they canceled my birthday party without even asking me. That was the final straw. Instead of accepting that, my dad messaged back saying he knew they treated me unfairly, and so had Mom. He said they were ready to do anything to make it up to me. That was a mistake. I took that anything seriously and gave them a condition. I told them the only way I'd even consider coming back or talking to Grandpa about maybe helping them again was if my sister moved out first. She's been working for 2 years now and is more than old enough to live on her own. By now, she should have saved up enough to get her own place. I don't think that's unreasonable. But of course, my parents flipped out. They said I was being cruel and unreasonable, even heartless. And now, I'm wondering, am I really the bad guy here for saying I'd only move back if my sister moves out? Edit. A lot of folks were asking why I never spoke up sooner or told anyone in my family about how my parents treated me. And honestly, it's because for the longest time, it all just seemed petty. Not huge, dramatic events, just little things that added up over time. Like, I was always expected to leave the last slice of pizza, or any food really, if my sister liked it. I wasn't allowed to finish anything unless she said she didn't want it. Same thing with clothes. If I liked something she wore, I wasn't allowed to buy it or even wear something similar. My parents told me she had a unique style and I shouldn't copy her. Which meant no trendy clothes for me. Most of the time, I had to make do with her hand-me-downs since we were about the same size. Buying me anything new? That was rare. And yeah, I know these things might sound small, but they wear on you. Over time, they start to make you feel like you matter less. Still, I didn't think it was serious enough to tell my relatives about. I figured no one would really care, or worse, that they'd tell my parents and it would just make things worse for me at home. As for my grandpa, like I said, He's someone people really respect. Back in his prime, he was one of the top lawyers around and had a reputation for being deeply moral, disciplined, and successful. And he's still very well off, financially speaking. So yeah, everyone in the family looks up to him. Could I have gone to him earlier? Maybe. But until recently, he had his hands full. He'd been taking care of my grandma, who was in the final stages of her life. He was fully devoted to her care, and I didn't want to burden him with my stuff while he was already going through something so heavy. Then after she passed, he was grieving. I didn't feel like it was the right time to unload my problems on him. But now that he's stepped up and offered to help me, I couldn't be more grateful. He's always been good to me, and we've always had a solid relationship. So it makes sense that he offered to let me stay with him until I head off to college. He's even told me he'll cover all my college expenses until I'm able to support myself. That kind of support? It means the world to me. Update 1. So, I've made my decision, I'm sticking to my condition. Even though I told my parents I'd consider moving back home if they kick my sister out, the truth is, I have no intention of going back, no matter what they do. I just wanted to see if they'd actually follow through, to see if they were serious about wanting me back, or if they'd choose my sister over everything, even over Grandpa cutting them off financially. I haven't told Grandpa about this little condition I threw out there. Honestly, I don't think I need to. Especially considering he had been keeping things from me too, things I didn't find out about until recently. So in a way, I guess we're even. What I'm referring to is something big. It turns out, Grandpa knew all along that my parents never really wanted me. I'd always wondered why they treated my sister like royalty while I got pushed to the sidelines. She never seemed particularly special, nothing that would explain how they constantly favored her. Grandpa finally told me the whole story. Originally, my parents only wanted one child. My sister. But 5 years after she was born, my mom got pregnant with me unexpectedly. Their plan was to terminate the pregnancy, but then my dad made the mistake of telling my mom's parents. And they weren't having it. They told my parents that a new life was a blessing, and it would be cruel to reject it. So, my maternal grandparents convinced them to go through with the pregnancy. But then tragedy struck. When my mom was 8 months along with me, her parents were in a horrible car crash. They hung on for a couple of weeks, but both of them passed away. It shattered my mom. She broke down emotionally and mentally. Grandpa said she had what sounded like a full-on breakdown and even had to be admitted to a psychiatric facility for a while. While she was in there, she apparently started saying things like I was bad luck and blamed me for everything that had happened. When she eventually got better and came home, she was more stable, but the damage was already done. Deep down, they regretted keeping me. They actually planned to put me up for adoption after I was born. But that time, it was my dad's parents, my paternal grandparents, who stepped in and put their foot down. They told my parents that they were being unreasonable and refused to let them give me up. So, in the end, my parents kept me. But not because they wanted to. They raised me because they had to, not because they loved me the way they loved my sister. Grandpa told me all of this when I asked him what he meant that night when he said he should have done something a long time ago. Now I get it. And honestly, I agree. He should have stepped in sooner. But now that I know the truth, everything makes so much more sense. It explains everything, the favoritism, the coldness, the way I always felt like I didn't belong. And knowing all that, I've realized I'll never go back to that house. Ever. The way I'm handling things now? It's more than justified. They punished me for something that wasn't even my fault. At least when I'm holding them accountable, it's for something they actually did. I'll admit, I'm still a little angry with Grandpa for not telling me sooner. But I also understand it's not exactly an easy thing to tell a kid. And right now, he's the only person I can really count on, so I'm trying not to let that resentment get the better of me. Update 2. It's been a week and 4 days since I moved out. During that time, my parents haven't stopped trying to get in touch. They kept messaging, begging me to reconsider the condition I set, but I ignored every single one. I figured, why talk until they'd made a real decision? Then, 3 days ago, the text stopped. No calls, no messages. I actually started thinking maybe they'd finally given up. But I was wrong. Today after school, I was getting ready to head home when I spotted my sister standing outside the building, just waiting. And the second I saw her, I got a bad feeling. Something just didn't sit right with me. So I asked one of my guy friends to walk me home. He's on the football team, built like a linebacker, and I knew if my sister tried anything, he'd have my back. He's been a close friend for years and knows the whole story, all of it. So when I asked, he didn't hesitate. He said of course he'd walk with me. As we started walking, my sister began following us. She didn't say anything, just followed us in silence. And it was creepy as hell. Halfway home, I couldn't take it anymore. I stopped, turned around, and asked her what exactly she thought she was doing. She said she didn't want to talk in front of a stranger. I told her flat out I didn't want to talk to her at all, stranger or not. That's when she launched into her little guilt trip. She said our parents were stressed and miserable, and it was all my fault. Apparently, they finally told her about the condition I gave them, that I wouldn't come home or even speak to Grandpa about helping them unless she moved out. And now she was there to confront me about it, claiming I was being selfish and unfair. Honestly, the nerve. I looked her straight in the face and told her the exact same thing she once told me: if I can't be happy, then neither can you. That's what she said when she got my birthday party cancelled, and now it's her turn to see how that logic feels. Then I turned around to keep walking. She started shouting after me, calling me a horrible person. But I didn't even flinch. I didn't look back, didn't say a word. I just kept walking, and as I did, I flipped her off. I guess that's what really set her off, because next thing I knew, she lunged at me. I went down hard, with her weight in my backpack slamming me into the pavement. But thankfully, my friend was right there and stepped in immediately. Within seconds, he'd pulled her off of me like she weighed nothing. When I got up and brushed myself off, I looked up and saw him holding her back with one arm, like it was no big deal. That moment made me realize I was right to ask him to walk me home. I've always known my sister had a violent streak, and today proved it. I was furious. Not just because she attacked me, but because she actually thought she could get away with it. So I walked right up to her, slapped her hard across the face, and told her if she ever laid a hand on me again, I'd call the police. I reminded her that after everything she's already put our parents through, another scandal is the last thing they need. And would you believe it, she still had the gall to keep arguing. After I slapped my sister, my friend and I just kept walking. She didn't follow us after that, guess she knew better. Once we got back to Grandpa's house, I told him everything that happened. His first instinct was to call the cops, but I told him it wasn't even worth it. I told him she was just a loser trying to stir up trouble, and honestly, I think she learned her lesson. Plus, with everything else going on at home, I'm sure she was already walking on thin ice with our parents. That's when I finally told Grandpa about the condition I'd given my parents, that I'd only even consider talking to them if my sister moved out. I was a little nervous about his reaction, thought he might be upset. But to my surprise, he just laughed. Like, genuinely laughed out loud. He said it was clever, and that if anyone deserved to be messed with, it was definitely my parents. So that was that. Even though I was still a little sore from being slammed to the ground earlier, I felt oddly satisfied. I'd finally stood up to my sister, and yeah, I'd slapped the daylights out of her, but she had it coming. That moment had been a long time in the making. Now, I just hope she and my parents take the hint and leave me alone for good. Update 3. It's been almost a month now since I moved out. I start college in September, so I'll only be staying with Grandpa for another couple of months. High school's officially over. I had my graduation ceremony a few days ago, and prom was incredible. And yes, my date was the football player friend I mentioned in my last update. Turns out, some of you guessed it, we're officially together now. I just wanted to start with that happy little update before diving back into the drama. So, 2 days after the whole fight with my sister, I got a message from my parents. They said they'd made their decision, they were going to let my sister keep living with them. They claimed I was too jealous and petty to be around her, and that they no longer wanted me back in the house. They even admitted that the only reason they tried to bring me back in the first place was because they wanted Grandpa's financial support. But now, apparently, they didn't need it anymore. My mom's older brother had stepped in as a business partner and investor, so they said they were fine without my grandpa's money and without me. I think they expected that message to hurt me. But I already knew the truth. I knew their intentions from day one, so hearing it laid out so plainly didn't faze me one bit. I didn't even bother replying. A few hours later, though, they messaged me again. This time, they told me they were blocking me. They said I was a horrible human being, just like my sister had said. They called me violent and ungrateful. Violent, because of the slap, of course. And conveniently, they chose to ignore the fact that my sister had literally tackled me first. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they never even heard that part. She probably forgot to mention that she was the one who attacked me. Ungrateful, because apparently I had the audacity to complain about how I'd been treated, despite everything they'd done for me. They reminded me of how much money they'd spent raising me on food, school, clothes, and how I should be thankful. But you know what? That's not parenting. That's just the bare minimum. You don't get a gold star for feeding and clothing your own kid. Yet my parents acted like I owed them the world for simply doing what they were supposed to do. I wanted to reply. I really did. But then I realized it would be a total waste of energy. So before they could block me, I blocked them first. And just like that, I was done. Finally, completely done. Grandpa and I have been living pretty peacefully since then. He's been true to his word, he's covering all my college expenses, and he's been supportive in every possible way. I've already gotten accepted into several of the colleges I applied to, and I'm still waiting to hear back from a few top choices. Things are really looking up. It's not perfect, of course. I still catch myself getting upset with Grandpa from time to time, mainly for not stepping in earlier, for not rescuing me when I really needed it. But he's trying now, and that means something. I know he regrets not being able to help me back then, but we're working through it together. And now, I don't have to face my parents or any of their chaos ever again. Update 4. Hey again! It's officially been 1 full year since my last update, and I just wanted to thank everyone who's left such kind comments and DMs. Your support has meant the world to me. I'm doing great now. Honestly, better than I ever imagined. My grandpa and I are closer than ever, he's my favorite person on this planet, no contest. We've both made mistakes in the past, but we've worked through them. I've forgiven him, and we've moved forward. I wouldn't trade this new chapter of my life for anything. As for my parents and sister, from what I've heard, they've pretty much been cut off by everyone on my dad's side of the family. Grandpa made sure people knew what had happened, and once they found out, they took a step back. I guess my parents thought they could sweep everything under the rug like they always did, but this time, they couldn't. They brought this on themselves. Karma really did its thing. My mom's side of the family is still in contact with them, but that's about it. And as for my sister, I have no clue what she's doing with her life, but I heard she finally moved out and is living on her own as of last week. That bit of news actually reminded me to post this final update. My boyfriend and I are still going strong. Since my college is close by, I go home on the weekends, and we see each other then. I've made a bunch of new friends at school, and for the first time in forever, I feel like a completely different person in the best possible way. So yeah, I'm happy. Genuinely, peacefully, finally happy. Thanks again for sticking with me through this whole ride.